This video is a testament to the power of our collective prayers and unwavering commitment. Every prayer you've lifted, every testimony you've watched, every comment you've shared, and every time you've spread the word about this ministry, it all matters. This is the fruit of your faithfulness. Together, we've stood beside new believers and Christians facing unimaginable challenges in some of the world's most hostile environments. We've reached out through prayer, through connection, and through the simple act of showing up again and again in this community. As you watch this testimony, know that you played a part in making it possible. This is what happens when a community refuses to give up, refuses to stay silent, and refuses to forget those who need us most. Your engagement isn't just support, it's partnership in transforming lives. Thank you for being the hands and feet of this mission. Let's continue to stand together, pray together, and witness what God can do through our united efforts. Now listen closely to the end. Have you ever wondered what happens when people hold onto their faith even when things get really tough? Let me tell you about something amazing happening right now in Arab countries. These are places where most people follow Islam, but Christianity is actually growing there. This might surprise you because not many people talk about it. Today we are going to learn about 10 different Arab countries where Christianity is getting stronger. Some of these Christians have been living there for thousands of years. Others moved there recently for work. But all of them have one thing in common. They refuse to give up their faith no matter what happens. Our first stop is Lebanon, a beautiful country with mountains and old cities. Lebanon is really special because it has more Christians than any other Arab country. About 40 out of every 100 people there are Christians. That means if you walked into a room with 100 Lebanese people, 40 of them would be Christians. Lebanon has amazing churches everywhere. Some are built on hills and look like castles. In the capital city Beirut, you can find different kinds of Christian churches. There are Maronite churches, Orthodox churches, and Armenian churches. These churches are not just buildings. They are part of what makes Lebanon unique. What makes Lebanon really different from other Arab countries is how the government works. The country made rules that protect Christians and give them important jobs in the government. The president of Lebanon must always be a Maronite Christian. This means Christians have a real voice in running the country. Other religious groups also get positions so everyone shares power. Lebanon has been through some really hard times. There was a terrible civil war that lasted for many years. The economy crashed and people struggled to buy food and medicine. Wars happened in nearby countries that affected Lebanon too. But through all of this, Christians in Lebanon did not disappear. Instead, their faith grew stronger. Right now, Christianity in Lebanon is growing by about 1.2% every year. That might sound like a small number, but it actually means thousands of new believers. Lebanese Christians work as teachers, doctors, business owners, artists, and politicians. They help shape what Lebanon becomes. They run schools and universities where both Christians and Muslims learn together. They operate hospitals that treat everyone regardless of religion. Lebanon shows us something important. When Christians are protected and respected, they can do amazing things for their whole country. While Christians face problems in other Middle Eastern countries, Lebanon stands as a place of hope. It proves that different religions can live together peacefully when everyone respects each other. Now let me take you to Egypt, one of the most interesting countries in this documentary. Egypt is famous for its pyramids and the Nile River, but did you know it has one of the oldest Christian communities in the entire world? The Coptic Orthodox Church started in Egypt way back in the 1st century. That means Egyptian Christians have been following Jesus for almost 2,000 years without stopping. The Apostle Mark, who wrote one of the 4 Gospels in the Bible, brought Christianity to Egypt a long time ago. Since then, Coptic Christians have kept their faith alive through good times and bad times. Today, about 10 to 15 out of every 100 Egyptians are Christians. That might not sound like a lot compared to Lebanon, but remember that Egypt has a huge population of over 100 million people. So we are talking about 10 to 15 million Christians living there right now. Here is something really exciting. Christianity in Egypt is not just surviving. It is actually growing. In 2025, the number of Christians there is increasing by about 1.3% every year. More and more people, especially in big cities like Cairo and Alexandria, are becoming Christians. Some are born into Christian families, but others are choosing to follow Jesus even though it can be difficult. Life is not easy for Egyptian Christians. The country has gone through political problems and economic troubles. Many times Christians face discrimination, which means people treat them unfairly just because of their religion. There have even been times when churches were attacked or Christians were hurt. But none of this has stopped them. In fact, these challenges have made their faith even stronger. All across Egypt, churches are being fixed up and made beautiful again. Coptic Christians are not just keeping old traditions alive. They are building new things too. Christian schools are teaching thousands of children. Monasteries, which are special places where monks live and pray, are welcoming visitors and training new church leaders. Christian organizations run hospitals and help poor people get food and medicine. They serve everyone, not just Christians. Many young Egyptians are turning to Christianity because they find peace and hope in it. Some say it gives them clear answers about right and wrong in a confusing world. Others feel connected to their Egyptian heritage because Christianity has been part of Egypt for so long. When you see a Coptic Christian, you might notice a small cross tattooed on their wrist. This is a tradition that shows everyone they are proud to be Christian no matter what. If you haven't subscribed yet, we'd love for you to be part of this journey. Our community is built on real stories and real people, voices that challenge us to think deeper and live with greater clarity. Our next country has one of the saddest but also most hopeful stories. Iraq was once home to one of the biggest and oldest Christian communities in the Middle East. Before the year 2003, about 1.5 million Christians lived there. These included different groups like Chaldeans, Assyrians, Syriac Catholics, and Armenian Apostolic Christians. Their families had been Christian for hundreds and hundreds of years, keeping their faith alive in the same towns and villages where their great-great-great-grandparents once lived. But then something terrible happened. After the U.S. invasion in 2003, Iraq became very dangerous. A group called ISIS rose up and started attacking Christians in horrible ways. They bombed churches where families went to pray. They kidnapped priests and sometimes killed them. They forced entire Christian neighborhoods to empty out. In towns where you could once hear people singing hymns and praying, everything went silent. Families had to run away from their homes with almost nothing, leaving behind everything they had built over generations. The destruction was so bad that most Christians left Iraq. Today, only about 300,000 to 400,000 Christians remain in the whole country. That means more than 1 million Christians had to flee to other countries to stay safe. It seemed like Christianity in Iraq might disappear completely. Many people thought the ancient Christian communities would become just stories in history books. But here is where the story gets amazing. Even after all that destruction, Christianity in Iraq is coming back to life. It is growing again. Right now, it is growing at about 2.5% every year. That is actually faster than in Lebanon or Egypt. This growth is happening especially in places like the Nineveh Plains and parts of Kurdistan, where it is safer for Christians to live. How is this possible after such terrible things happened? People from all around the world decided to help. Christian organizations, governments, and regular people who cared sent money and workers to Iraq. They helped rebuild churches that had been destroyed. They fixed homes so families could move back. They built schools so Christian children could learn. Local priests and church leaders worked day and night to bring their communities back together. Iraqi Christians today are living proof that faith can survive even the worst persecution. They carry with them ancient traditions, old languages that almost nobody else speaks anymore, and special ways of worshiping that go back to the very early church. They remember what happened to them, but they refuse to let hatred and violence define who they are or what their future will be. In a land where hope was shattered into pieces, the light of Christianity is flickering back to life, growing brighter every year. Just next door to Iraq is Syria, another country with a story of war and survival. Syria has been through one of the worst civil wars in recent history. Before the war started, about 10 out of every 100 Syrians were Christians. These were not new Christians. Their families had been following Jesus since the very beginning of Christianity, even before Christianity spread to Europe. Syrian Christians include Greek Orthodox, Syriac Orthodox, and other Eastern Christian groups that have incredibly old traditions. Syrian cities like Damascus, Aleppo, and Homs once had beautiful churches, monasteries, and Christian schools everywhere. Some of these churches were over 1,000 years old. Christian families lived in their neighborhoods for generation after generation, keeping their faith strong and passing it down to their children. Everything seemed stable until the Civil War broke out and changed everything overnight. The war was devastating. Bombs fell on cathedrals where families used to worship. Christian neighborhoods got caught in the fighting. Families had to grab whatever they could carry and run for their lives. Entire towns that once heard church bells ringing every Sunday became silent and empty. The ancient buildings that had stood for centuries were damaged or destroyed. Many people thought Syrian Christianity would not survive this disaster. But something surprising is happening now in 2025. Christianity in Syria is slowly making a comeback. It is growing at about 1% every year. That might sound small, but remember this is happening in a country that just went through a terrible war. In cities like Damascus and Aleppo, where Christian areas almost disappeared completely, life is returning. Church bells are ringing again on Sunday mornings. Youth groups are meeting again to pray and learn together. New people are becoming Christians, not because their parents were Christian, but because they are searching for healing, peace, and meaning after all the horror they experienced. What is really inspiring is what happened to Syrian Christians who had to leave their country. They did not just disappear into other countries and forget their faith. Instead, they became even more active in keeping Christianity alive. In Lebanon, Turkey, and countries far away in Europe and America, Syrian Christians built new churches and started new communities. They held tightly to their identity and their ancient traditions. They made sure their children learned the old prayers and hymns. They refused to let war erase who they were. These Syrian Christians living in other countries are doing something amazing. They are helping each other, sending aid back to Syria, and teaching the world about their ancient faith. They are re-establishing old liturgical practices that were almost lost because of the war. A liturgy is the special way Christians worship with prayers, songs, and rituals that have been passed down for centuries. Syrian Christians are making sure these beautiful traditions do not die out. After hearing about the struggles in Iraq and Syria, let me tell you about Jordan, a country that gives us hope. Jordan is special because it shows us what happens when a government actually protects religious minorities instead of making life hard for them. Christians make up only about 6 out of every 100 people in Jordan, which is a small percentage. But Jordan has become famous for being a place where different religions can live together peacefully. While countries all around Jordan have had wars and conflicts between different religious groups, Jordan has stayed relatively calm and stable. The government has made rules that protect freedom of worship. This means Christians can go to church, celebrate their holidays, and practice their faith without being afraid. This might not sound like a big deal, but in that part of the world, it actually is huge. Many Christians who cannot worship freely in their own countries look at Jordan and wish their governments were the same way. Because Jordan is safe and welcoming, Christianity there is growing. Right now it is increasing at about 1.5% every year. A big reason for this growth is that Christian refugees from Syria and Iraq have been coming to Jordan to escape violence. When these families arrived with almost nothing, they found something they desperately needed. They found safety and a chance to rebuild their lives without constantly worrying about bombs or attacks. Now let me take you to one of the most modern and surprising places on the documentary. The United Arab Emirates, which people usually just call the UAE, is known for its amazing futuristic cities. You have probably seen pictures of Dubai with its super tall buildings, indoor ski slopes, and man-made islands shaped like palm trees. Abu Dhabi has incredible architecture and some of the richest people in the world live there. But here is what most people do not know. The UAE has quietly become home to one of the most diverse Christian populations in any Arab country. Today, about 1 million Christians live in the UAE. That is a huge number for a Muslim-majority country. But here is the interesting part. Unlike Lebanon or Egypt where Christians have lived for thousands of years, almost all the Christians in the UAE are new arrivals. They are expatriates, which means people who moved there from other countries to work. These Christians come from the Philippines, India, Nigeria, South Korea, the United States, and countries all across Europe. They brought their faith with them when they came looking for jobs and opportunities. The UAE is growing so fast that it needs millions of workers. Some work in construction building those tall skyscrapers. Others work as nurses, teachers, engineers, or in hotels and restaurants. Many are professionals like doctors, businesspeople, and pilots. And a huge number of these workers happen to be Christians. So even though the UAE does not have many native Emirati Christians, the country now has vibrant churches full of believers from dozens of different countries and cultures. Christianity in the UAE is growing at about 2% every year as of 2025. This growth reflects two things. First, the country keeps bringing in more foreign workers. Second, there is a real spiritual hunger among the people living there. Many workers are far from home and family. They face challenges and sometimes feel lonely. Their faith becomes even more important to them because it gives them strength, community, and hope in a foreign land. Our next stop is Qatar, one of the smallest but richest countries in the world. You might have heard about Qatar because it hosted the World Cup soccer tournament recently. The country has so much oil and natural gas that it became incredibly wealthy. But just like the UAE, Qatar's Christian story is not about ancient communities. It is about migrant workers who brought their faith with them from far away. Most Christians in Qatar come from South Asia, especially countries like India and Pakistan. Many others come from the Philippines and various African nations. These workers came to Qatar to build its cities, work in its hotels, clean its buildings, and fill all kinds of jobs that keep the country running. They often work long hours in very hot weather doing difficult jobs. But despite these hard conditions, they hold on to their faith. In fact, their faith often becomes the thing that gives them strength to keep going. Christianity in Qatar is growing at about 2% every year. Some of this growth comes from new workers arriving. But something else is happening too that most people do not talk about. In rare cases, some people in Qatar are actually converting to Christianity. This means they are choosing to follow Jesus even though they grew up Muslim. This is incredibly sensitive because Qatar, like most Gulf countries, has strict laws about religion. Converting away from Islam can lead to serious legal problems and family rejection. Let me tell you about Kuwait, a small country squeezed between Saudi Arabia and Iraq. Kuwait might be tiny on the map, but when it comes to how it treats Christians, it stands out in a really positive way. Just like the UAE and Qatar, Kuwait became rich from oil. This wealth brought millions of foreign workers to the country. And many of those workers happened to be Christians who needed jobs and opportunities. You will not find many Kuwaiti citizens who are Christian. That is extremely rare. But the Christian community there is made up mostly of expatriates. Filipino Catholics form a huge part of this community. There are also many Indian Protestants and Christians from Western countries and various African nations. All these people came to Kuwait for work, but they brought something precious with them. They brought their faith and their determination to keep worshiping God no matter where they lived. What sets Kuwait apart from Qatar and some other Gulf countries is how much freedom Christians have to worship. The government allows Christians to worship openly in designated church compounds. In Kuwait City, which is the capital, there are several officially recognized churches. These are real church buildings, not just secret meeting places. Different denominations have their own spaces. Roman Catholics have their churches. Anglicans have theirs. Evangelical groups and Orthodox communities each have places to meet and worship. Christianity in Kuwait is growing at about 1.5% every year as of 2025. This growth is driven mainly by workers continuing to arrive in the country. Kuwait is stable and relatively safe compared to some of its neighbors. This stability makes it an attractive place for people looking for work in the Gulf region. And as long as workers keep coming, the Christian population will likely keep growing. Now we travel to North Africa to visit Tunisia, a country that tells a very different kind of story. Tunisia sits on the Mediterranean coast and is known for being one of the most secular Arab countries. Secular means the government tries to separate religion from politics more than most Arab nations do. Most Tunisians are Muslim, and Christians make up only a tiny fraction of the 12 million people who live there. You could walk through Tunisian cities for days and barely see any signs of Christianity. But even though the Christian community is very small, something interesting is happening. Christianity is growing at about 1.5% every year. That might not sound like much, and the actual number of Christians is still quite small. But what this growth represents is much bigger than just statistics. It shows that even in places where Christianity seems almost invisible, the faith is finding ways to spread and touch people's lives. Much of this growth comes from evangelical Christianity, which focuses on sharing the gospel message and building personal relationships with Jesus. Young Tunisians especially are exploring Christianity in ways that would surprise most people. But here is the challenge. Tunisia has legal and social pressures against religious conversion. The law does not officially support people leaving Islam to follow another religion. Society also frowns upon it. Families might reject someone who converts. Friends might turn their backs. People could lose their jobs or face harassment. Because of these dangers, most Tunisian Christians who come from Muslim backgrounds keep their faith very private. They practice what some people call underground Christianity. This means they worship in secret, usually in small groups that meet in homes. These are called house churches. A house church might be just 5 or 10 people gathering in someone's living room to pray, sing worship songs quietly, read the Bible, and encourage each other. They cannot advertise their meetings. They cannot put up signs. They have to be extremely careful about who they invite because the wrong person finding out could cause serious problems. Many young Tunisians are discovering Christianity through the internet. They watch Christian videos on YouTube. They read Christian websites and blogs. They join online discussion groups where they can ask questions about faith without anyone in their real life knowing. Some have conversations with Christians from other countries through social media. The internet has become a powerful tool for people seeking answers to spiritual questions in places where talking about Christianity openly is dangerous. We come now to our final country, Mauritania, and this is perhaps the most challenging story of all. Mauritania sits on the Atlantic coast of northwest Africa, touching the edge of the Sahara Desert. It is one of the harshest places in the entire Arab world for Christians. Islam is the official state religion, and the government has strict laws against proselytizing, which means trying to convince people to change their religion. For someone to openly follow Jesus in Mauritania can cost them absolutely everything. The Christian population in Mauritania is extremely small. Most citizens are Muslim and very few would ever admit to being Christian even if they were. The risks are just too high. But here is what is amazing. Even in this incredibly difficult environment, Christianity has not been completely extinguished. In fact, reports from 2025 show that Christianity is actually growing there, slowly but steadily, at about 1% every year. That might seem like almost nothing, but in a place like Mauritania, every single conversion is a miracle. This growth does not happen in public. There are no church buildings with crosses on top. There are no Christian radio stations or public worship services. Christianity in Mauritania exists almost entirely underground. It happens in secret meetings, in whispered conversations, and in the quiet decisions of individuals who choose to follow Jesus knowing full well what it might cost them. The faith spreads through personal relationships, through people sharing their testimonies one-on-one with trusted friends. Most of the Christians in Mauritania are expatriates who came from other countries. Many are migrant workers from sub-Saharan Africa, from countries like Senegal, Mali, and other nations south of the Sahara. Others work for foreign aid organizations, helping with development projects, healthcare, and education. Some are from Asia. These expatriate believers form small, tightly knit underground communities. They meet in homes or hidden locations where they can pray, worship, and read the Bible together without being discovered. These secret gatherings are incredibly important for believers in Mauritania. Imagine living in a place where you cannot talk about the most important part of your life. You cannot tell your coworkers you went to church on Sunday because there are no churches to attend. You cannot share about answered prayers or what you learned from the Bible. You have to hide this huge part of who you are. It would be so lonely and difficult. That is why these underground communities become lifelines. When believers gather together, even in secret, they can finally be themselves. They can worship freely. They can encourage each other. They can remember they are not alone. The courage required to be a Christian in Mauritania is almost unimaginable. For expatriates, being discovered as an active Christian could mean deportation. They would be forced to leave the country, lose their jobs, and have to start over somewhere else. But for native Mauritanians who convert to Christianity, the consequences are even more severe. They could face rejection from their entire family. They might lose their jobs and their homes. They could be physically harmed. Some could even be arrested. The social pressure is enormous because leaving Islam is seen as betraying your family, your community, and your country. The Christians in Mauritania, both expatriates and native converts, live out their faith through quiet witness. An aid worker who treats everyone with dignity and respect. A migrant laborer who refuses to cheat or lie even when it would benefit him. A new believer who secretly prays for her family members while outwardly conforming to expectations. These small acts plant seeds. They show people what it looks like when someone truly follows Jesus. And slowly, quietly, hearts begin to change. Mauritania may be at the bottom of every list for religious freedom. It may be one of the hardest places on earth to be a Christian. But the story happening there is a testament to something powerful. It shows that faith cannot be completely crushed by laws or threats or persecution. Where there is even a tiny opening, even the smallest bit of freedom, the message of Jesus finds a way through. The quiet rise of Christianity in Mauritania serves as a witness to everyone who hears about it. It tells us that some people value knowing God more than they value safety. It reminds us that courage and faith can exist in the darkest, most difficult places. So we have journeyed through 10 different Arab countries, from Lebanon where Christians help run the government to Mauritania where Christians risk everything just to pray. We have seen ancient churches rising from the rubble of war. We have met migrant workers building communities of faith far from home. We have learned about underground believers who practice their faith in secret. Each story is different, but they all point to the same truth. Christianity in the Arab world is not disappearing. It is growing, sometimes slowly and sometimes surprisingly fast, but always with remarkable courage and resilience. From the cedars of Lebanon to the deserts of Mauritania, from the pyramids of Egypt to the skyscrapers of Dubai, the Christian faith continues to find new life. It adapts to different circumstances. It survives persecution and thrives in freedom. It crosses borders with migrant workers and spreads through internet connections. It never looks exactly the same in any two places, but the core message remains unchanged. The message of hope, love, forgiveness, and new life in Jesus. These stories matter because they challenge what many people think they know about the Middle East and North Africa. They show us a side of the Arab world that rarely makes the news. They introduce us to believers whose names we will never know but whose faith inspires anyone who hears their stories. Whether it is a Lebanese family attending their centuries-old church, an Egyptian convert finding peace in Cairo, an Iraqi Christian returning home to rebuild, or a Mauritanian believer praying in secret, each person adds to this remarkable story of faith refusing to fade away.